Welcome to the Broncos Source Podcast.
Hello, Broncos fans, and welcome to the Broncos Source Podcast. I am your host today, Mile Jaimez, along with my favorite co-host. Just kidding, Stephen. Sean. Sean, we are here together to have a therapy session and maybe cry a little bit in front of everybody because what looked like such a promising game for our Denver Broncos turned out to be a gut punch for all of us, right? In the very beginning of the game, they looked unstoppable because they were. And I was like, we're gonna put 45 on these guys tonight, you know?
Yeah.
Like they are not gonna stop us at all. And I really think, and we'll get more into it, the momentum swung at halftime, unfortunately. The Broncos now sit in a less desirable position after this game, which we'll also get into. And then we'll also talk about our concerns about certain areas and positions on this team, Sean, that once looked very strong and promising for us. I think, I'd just like to get your thoughts on the game and what your mindset was like at the beginning and how it switched and what you ended up being like at the end of that one. That was not fun.
Yeah, it was the interesting part about it was when we were riding high, it was because of a run game that we didn't think existed. And you go from, there's zero expectations going to that game that's going to be the reason as to why you look so dominant. We thought we were going to win. I think our predictions proved that. We thought that they were going to be relatively close game, and maybe that would, I think, allude to the fact that and everybody that does these types of things or speaks about the Broncos, and even in the broadcast itself, run the damn ball. And so that's what we came out and did. I don't think any of us anticipated it being that effective and to use so many bodies to throw Mims back there and to have such effective runs from Watson and things like that. It literally looked like, oh my gosh, we found it. And then we're going to click on the rest of it like we always do in the second half, and we're going to run away with this thing. And then it just was poor play calling, poor time management, bad penalty, and all of a sudden the momentum going into the half is just like you said, it's not where it's supposed to be, not where it should have been based on the fact that we had literally scored on, I think, every possession that we had. So to go, and you're getting the ball out of the half. So it was disappointing. I know we talked about it a little bit before, and I know we'll get into it, but the good news is I think maybe the overall theme and thought process will be relatively negative, but I know we still have, I think from the mathematical standpoint, 86% chance of getting in. We still control our own destiny. There's a lot of things that even when we unfortunately gave away such a great opportunity, we're still in a relatively good position, all things considered.
Yeah, we are, and we'll talk a little bit about the Bengals game coming up because that game has turned into just the biggest game of the year at this point, which we thought the Chargers game would be. But we saw like the best of Sean Payton in that game, and then we saw the worst of Sean Payton in that game as well. So what I mean by that is we want to give him his flowers for that play calling early in the game on the first 3 drives because he was coaching circles around Jim Harbaugh, man. Like that Harbaugh and Bosa and Mac, those guys look like they didn't know what hit them. They're so confused and lost. And, we pretty much every play that we ran was just a positive play, and I was thinking to myself, where has this offense been all season long? Just so efficient. And there were no penalties, and it was just well played football. And then we get the interception by KAD at the end of the half, and it's looking good, right? We're up 21-10, and we're going to halftime with a 21-10 lead. This is great, and we're going to get the football back. Sign me up for that, And then for some reason, Sean Payton decides to throw a couple short passes. The first one was complete. I think it was a screen to Williams for -2 or something like that. And then they threw another one over the middle. And of course, it was, I don't know if it was a bad throw or what. It looked like a bad throw to me. And then you give them the opportunity with 3 timeouts to stop the clock because you know you're going to run the football right there. And it's just, it was very interesting to say the least play calling from Sean Payton there. And then you have the whole situation with the punt, which it was incidental contact, like very minor contact, in my opinion. He kind of just grazed his foot or whatever. I don't know. I thought it was
He
pretty
stuck
weak.
his leg out weird too.
Yeah. I was just like, okay. And then I was like, okay, well, that sucks. We're going to give him 15 yards, but they're going to have to throw a Hail Mary and whatever. That's not going to work, you know? So I thought we were in pretty good shape there. And then they come out and say that it's going to be a free kick, which is a bizarre rule in the NFL. And I'm not saying that the Broncos lost because of the rule. Of course, that's not true. But you're sitting there watching Cameron Dicker, who barely misses any kicks, and he's going to get a free kick into the end zone. I'm like, okay, well, he's going to make that, and he does. And you just had this feeling, Sean, creep over you, right? It's like, oh, man, that doesn't feel good going in the half. But then the Broncos come out, and they have a great drive again. It stalls a little bit, but they get 3 points, and they're up 11 points, right? And then for the rest of the game, the offense pretty much did nothing. And one thing that I wanted to touch on here is, yes, the referees were bad for the Broncos. They didn't call anything against the Chargers. But I'm not one of those fans that uses the refs as an excuse. The refs didn't, mismanage the clock at the end of the half. They didn't run into the punt returner. They didn't hit Justin Herbert on, when he was sliding down. You can't do it regardless of how little the contact is. You just can't do it. It just wasn't. And I know you and I disagreed on that play, but it's just dumb. Like, he's going down and you just can't be around it, and it ended up costing them a touchdown. But I don't want to use the refs as an excuse. The Broncos lost because the Broncos got outplayed after they went up 21-10. I think we can agree on that, Sean.
Yeah. Well, and I think anybody that knows anything about sports, and it's not just football, you can feel it when that momentum shifts. And it's not, you know, I don't want to be negative about it, but even when we were up 11, I'm like, we're going to lose this game. And it was just, I could just see the way that they were playing and just, yeah, you get 3 points, but it was ineffective in comparison to the first half. You gave them a cheap 3. There was penalties. Ben Powers had 2 false start penalties that just were not good. And it's just like, I don't know, man. I just had that feeling and I could see it coming. The defense, and I know we talked about it, to me, it's just too opportunistic. In like, you're only going to win if Benito or Sertan gets this big play and changes the course of the game. We're not playing defense like I think the statistics are saying we're playing defense. I am constantly thinking, wow, that like Jonathan Taylor truly ran all over us. Like, he got whatever he wanted. And outside of a boneheaded mistake, he ran a 41-yard touchdown that was practically untouched. And he ran all over us. Jameis threw all over us, and it's just, everybody's touting this defense, and it's so great. And maybe it's we're missing Riley Moss, and I know that seems to be a bigger loss than maybe we had originally anticipated, especially with how poorly Levi Wallace played in the Browns game. But just like the tackling and the quarterback contain, when Cooper went on that inside move yesterday on 3rd and long and just lets Herbert walk to it, that's the type of play where if you want to point to something to say that's why we lost, they're deep in their own zone, 3rd and long, have nothing. If he holds contain there, we get the ball back down 1 score. And it's just, I don't know, man. We talk about the coaching stuff with Peyton, and honestly, Vance has got to figure something out here because this is not going to get it done against playoff teams. The quarterback contain is a problem. Herbert's not this known running quarterback like Lamar is or like Josh is. So if you can't keep Anthony Richardson and Justin Herbert at bay, what the heck are you going to do in the playoffs, man? And it's just Nick Bonito, for all this defensive player of the year talk, outside of that stop on the 2-point conversion, I didn't notice him yesterday. And you and I are both big time Nick Bonito guys. So I'm not gonna kill him over one play. But what I do think it is now people know now. You got to go the first however many weeks, and people were like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Nobody knows who he is. He's not this big threat. Well, now you are. So now you're going to get the treatment that Myles Garrett gets, that T.J. Watt gets, that Max Crosby gets. And are you going to be able to adjust and still make plays, or are you going to play like you did yesterday and be a non-factor? So, I think there's a number of things. To your point, they missed the pass interference call. That one to me, you and I, you're right. We don't necessarily agree on the roughing the quarterback thing. I think it was soft as hell. But the one that they did miss, it was a horrible throw by Knicks. But
That's
it was
what I would
pass
say.
interference.
That's what I was going to
But dude
say.
never
That's
turned.
touchdown. It's touchdown.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If he throws it like he did the week before on the dot, like he did to Mims, he walks in. But he threw it short. He should have got the penalty. I think if it's Cortland Sutton there, he probably gets it. If it's not Marvin Mims, but if anything for the refs, that's the one that I point to. And again, we're not those guys that are going to hang our hat on that. But I think there's a lot of little things that we've maybe lucked out on a couple of these wins that I think are more of the problem that may cause us issues here, going up against a team that can score points.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the ref stuff again, because yes, I've seen a lot of people complaining about the pass interference, and yes, it was a missed call, but the call isn't even a factor if Bo Nix just hits a wide open receiver who jukes his corner out of his shorts on an over and out, like that's, or an out and up, sorry, out and up. These are the little things that the Broncos are going to have to do if they want to start beating teams with winning records, which now the Broncos, Sean, are 1-6. 1-6 against teams with a winning record. So, it's fun and it's nice and it's good, and we're not going to give them a hard time for beating up on the teams that they're supposed to beat. But at a certain point, if you want to get to where you're trying to go, you have to beat teams with a winning record. You have to beat good teams, and the Broncos just haven't done that this year. And the only team with a winning record that they've beaten is the Tampa Bay Bucks, and they're one game over 500 or something like that, 2 games.
Yeah.
So, there's cause for concern here. So if it's not one thing, it's another, right, with the Broncos. So we don't have a running game, but the defense plays awesome. Right. And then we find a running game and the defense plays terrible, and they can't seem to put it together for an entire 60 minutes of play in all phases. And that's been the problem all season long. And there were, to your point, some penalties that they missed, the pass interference. There was a block in the back on Bonito when they called Zach Allen offsides. I was like,
Yep.
You guys didn't see it?
Hold. I was like,
you guys didn't see that? Like,
yeah.
So, and there were holds everywhere. And I get that people want to draw the line to, oh, well, they wanted the Chargers to win because the Broncos play the Bengals in prime time on Saturday or whatever. I get it. But I really, really don't think that the NFL was out to get the Broncos, because if they were, the Broncos all their touchdowns would have been called back. They wouldn't have got that third touchdown where it was illegal man downfield, whether he was engaged in a block or not in that situation, because he had pushed someone off and then advanced up the field. That is a penalty. So I don't make excuses like that. If our team loses a football game, it's because they didn't execute, right? And I don't know the numbers, Sean, but you could probably tell me how many running plays did we actually run in the second half, because at no point until we were down 34-24 were we out of the game. And for most of the game, we were leading for crying out loud. So, like, why we went away from that run game is beyond me. And everyone has their theories, and I have my theory. I really just think that he wants to showcase Bo Nix and his ability to throw the ball. And sometimes it's just not the right thing to do. And one other thing about the offense, Sean, and I'll bring you in on this. If you watch the tape, it looks like the receivers are getting open, but their win rate or their release rate is not very good. And I really feel like the reason that the Broncos couldn't run the football last week, or excuse me, they couldn't pass the football last week, is because their receivers couldn't get open. I think teams are playing up on these guys and they're playing press coverage and they're just not letting guys get open. I know the Chargers themselves last night ran a lot of zone and too high safety because they had injured cornerbacks and all that stuff, and that's why the Broncos were taking advantage of them on the ground. But I really think that come playoff time, you play the Steelers or the Bills or something like that, they're going to press you, and they're going to make Bo Nix beat you, and they're going to make your receivers get open. And I'm just not sure, Sean, if this team can do that.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about it when we started too. I think some of this is, and I don't know if it's just a tendency for Sean or we abandon the run very quickly, and we throw a lot of passes for a young quarterback. I feel like we're always in the 40 plus throws, which seems crazy to me. And I know he's not a typical rookie from an age perspective, and he's played a lot of football, and maybe that's the thought process behind it. But even the telecast touched on it. It literally says "run it" on his play sheet, and I think it's known to him, and it's known to, gosh, I guess everybody, that we just abandon it quickly, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me when, like you said, we're still in this game all the way up until what, 10 minutes or less in the fourth quarter. So to completely abandon it in the third quarter when clearly the momentum is shift, how do you get momentum back? Right? Is sustained drives or big plays on defense, something like that. Well, your defense wasn't doing it. They couldn't stop anything. They couldn't catch
all
the ball,
night,
man. They were
all
horrible.
night, dude.
Horrible.
Yeah.
So, like, if you're not getting it from there, outside of Abrams Drain's, interception, there was no pressure on the quarterback. At no point did I mean, Tillman gets the only sack of the night. It just was not good. So how are you going to get it back? Well, going 3 and out and ineffective offense sure as hell isn't the answer. So, I don't even know if Estime touched the ball in the second half, which is crazy with how he played in the first half.
Yeah.
So, and like we said last week, you're going to be playing in cities where it's going to snow. You're going to have to run the ball. And anybody that's ever played NFL defense is probably in the playoffs going to make a rookie beat you. So you're probably going to have trouble running as it is. And if you're not good at it, you're just going to get beat in the trenches, and they're going to just kill you. And I just don't, and maybe this is just, we're still a young team, right? We young quarterback, young skill players. We're just young in general, so, which is good in the long run. And as Denver sports fans, we saw it with the Nuggets, we saw it with the Avalanche. It's just one of those things where this is a great story. There's really things to be super positive about, but it's ultimately probably not your year without a little bit of help or a little bit of luck. And that's probably okay, right? I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, I'm happy if we go 9-8, and I'm so glad we're in the positives. Like, I'm not there at all. But I also just think that the mistakes that we make and the style of play that we play is you're not beating the Buffalo Bills this year that way. And that's right now because of the game you lost yesterday, who you're probably going to catch in the first round, because they're likely not going to catch the Chiefs. And now you've dug yourself a hole and pretty much pigeonholed yourself into the 7 seed. So to your point, we're going to New York in December, so it's got to be cold. It could be a foot of snow. You're going to go up against the league MVP, and it's, you got 2 weeks to establish who it's going to be, whether it's Audric or, I don't know what the answer is, but, I don't know. It was disappointing to see such a shift after such a positive thing. We've touched on it. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, beat a dead Bronco, if you will. But it's just something that I had higher hopes for, and now you've got to go play defense against a team that can put up 40.
Yeah. Well, to your point, I'm looking at the numbers, Sean. Audric Estime, 9 carries, 48 yards. He averaged 5.3 yards a carry. Okay. And you're going to get mad at this one, especially. Javonte Williams, 4 carries, 24 yards, 6 yards a carry. And 13 carries between the two of them.
Yeah.
Blake Watson had 4 carries for 10 yards. And Bo Nix, once again, was our second leading rusher with 25 yards. So if you've got a back, and we've all been up and down and back and forth on Javonte this year, but he was playing good last night. You got a back averaging 6 yards a carry, and you don't give him the ball again. I think Sean gets caught up in these, not you, Sean Payton. I think Sean Payton gets caught up in this, like, he really wants to use all these guys as receivers, and they're just not receivers. You know, like they're not his Reggie Bush. Even McLaughlin, like, we don't have that player here. So why not just commit to running the football? You know, and Audric Estime, and I've talked about this, I talked about it last week, has the best vision on the team. And Blake Watson may be right behind him as far as the vision. We haven't talked about him much this year because he's been on the practice squad, but I know we talked about his talent in the offseason and how excited we were to get him as an undrafted free agent. But, like, there's talent in this backfield with those two and Javonte running the way he ran last night. And I really just think that Sean, I don't know what it is. I guess somebody would have to ask him, but he really does just get caught up in this pass game. And he's like, it's like an ego thing, right? Like, he doesn't want to do what's best for the team. He wants to do what he wants to do. And it gets the Broncos in trouble sometimes. Like, at the end of the first half, what were we doing? Are we going for a score there? Or I get if we're going for a score, go downfield. Cool. But if you're just throwing screen passes and 2-yard dump offs to the running back, like, what are you trying to just run the ball out and run the clock out?
Yep.
You know? And it would make sense if we tried to run the clock out in the first half and then fumbled it and then he went away from the run game because it made him shy, but we were passing the ball. Yep. And so I really think, and someone brought this up, Sean, and I don't know what you think. Someone said Bo Nix is good when the script is there, but when the script's gone, he's not as effective. Now, I don't think the script is more than 15 plays. After that, it's Sean Payton coaching against the defense. I really do think that there is talent on this team as far as the wide receiver, but maybe not like explosive talent. We have like possession receiver talent, especially in Vele and Sutton, but we don't have like that explosive playmaker besides Mims, who has been outstanding for the last like 3 weeks, you know? I still don't think we're getting him the football enough, by the way. Like, we have to give him the ball. Like, we give him 1 carry a game and he gets like 1 yard and then we're like, okay, never mind, we're not doing that. Yeah. And it's just really, I don't know, man. I have some concerns, especially about this defense. It feels like Vance Joseph has just completely abandoned his aggression since Riley Moss got hurt. The defense just hasn't been the same since he got hurt. It just hasn't. And you're right. They've been bailed out by a couple of huge plays. Nick Bonito's fumble recovery / pick six last week. And, you know, the interceptions galore against Jameis. I think they really have been bailed out by these plays. And that's fine, but it's kind of like a feast or famine offense, you know, like it's either big plays or it's nothing. And that's what the Broncos defense has been like. And it really, I think I counted maybe 5 blitzes last night from Vance Joseph. I get that it's Justin Herbert and he's very good against the blitz, but you kind of have to stick to your identity, you know, and I feel like Chris Abrams-Drain is playing well enough to where you could still be the aggressive defense that you were earlier in the season. And this is the kind of stuff that makes people question why Vance Joseph is even being considered for a head coach, you know. He just kind of goes away from his strength, just like Sean is. And there were so many times last night, Sean, where we were running zone defense for some reason, and we weren't having Surtain stay on McConkey, and he was just running wide open. And it just really felt like him and these no-name tight ends and all these other guys, they just ran free all night. And yes, Justin Herbert made a great play for the essentially the game-winning touchdown. That was a phenomenal throw. But I have concerns about this defense now, Sean. Unless they're causing turnovers, do you think that they can stop, for instance, the game we're about to talk about with the Bengals, or, can they stop the Bills? Can they stop the Steelers? Like, can they do that against any of these teams?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up about the defense, because there was passes to no-name receivers where there's literally not a Broncos defender in the frame, and you're getting him down in distance right where you want him, and you turn around and you're like, who the hell is 84, and why is there nobody within 15 yards of him? And it's always this mesh concept and blah 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 blah. It's McConkey looks like he's 12 years old, and he's the only receiver that they have that's any good. So
Yeah.
I don't get it. And you're about to go up against one of the best tandems in football. So if Riley Moss is back,
I think we lost Sean temporarily here. Riley Moss. If Riley Moss isn't back,
I don't know that we win this game. I mean, I assume that Pat Surtain follows Jamar Chase. I think
we
that's the only.
assumed he would chase McConkey, and that didn't happen
Yeah,
either.
I
So.
just, that defensive stuff. I hit it before, you hit it. That concerns me. The thing with the running backs, as you were jumping in that, and I didn't want to miss it. The first 4 plays of the game, I believe he used each of the different backs in the backfield. It was Estime, Javonte, Mims, Watson. I don't know what we're trying to prove there. Like, hey, all these guys are good. We can play all of them. But to your point, to have 13 carries from guys, that were playing fantastic, it just doesn't make sense to me, man. I don't get it. And, the separation thing with the receivers, you're right. Vele and Sutton, they make great catches. They're great possession receivers. We don't have Jamar Chase. We don't have Justin Jefferson. We don't have those guys. So this Bengals game does certainly concern me. I know they can't play defense, so that's the one hope, is that we can find a rhythm, stay with it for 4 quarters, and put something together from start to finish. But I'm really going to have to see this injury report, because I don't think Abrams Drain can cover T. Higgins, and if we're going to be in that zone as often as we were yesterday, it's
Burrow's going to
clear.
eat him up.
Yeah, I don't, unless we're getting pressure, and I know their line gives up a lot of sacks, and that would maybe be the big difference, because the Chargers kept us out of the backfield, and maybe the Bengals cannot. And then if we're wreaking havoc, and we're the number 1 sack team in the NFL that we are boasting, until somebody passes us this week or whatever. But that would be the only way we could stay in it. Benito and Cooper and Allen are going to have to get after it next week, or we could be in trouble for sure.
I think this is a game, Sean, where we do not want to get in a shootout. I don't think we would win a shootout against them. I think this is a game where we control the football on the ground and we keep Joe Burrow, as much as we all like Joe Burrow, just not against the Broncos, right? We keep him on the sideline as much as possible. And I know the Broncos don't play football that way. I know they're not like a possession team, like like those recent Tennessee Titan teams where they just ran the ball and played defense, right? But I don't think that you want to get into a 45, 42, 48, 45 kind of game with this team. I just don't see that ending well for the Broncos. So yes, their defense is bad, but they have a lot of talent on that defense. I don't know why they're playing bad. It's kind of a mystery. I know they have some injuries and things like that. It's going to be an interesting game. I don't have a lot of hope after last night, because the Bengals offense is exponentially better, right, than the Chargers offense. Joe Burrow is arguably the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I know Josh Allen's the MVP, but like if the Bengals were, whatever, 12-2, he would be right in that conversation as well. But they're 6-8, and that's why he's not in it. So Joe Burrow, he scares me, man. And I think if the Broncos run too much zone against him, they're going to pay big time. And he's another guy that he's just going to throw to whoever's open. I know he gets it to Chase in big moments and things like that, but he's just gonna utilize all his guys, and that's what Herbert did so well last night against the Broncos. Is he just didn't care who he threw the ball to. He was just making completions left and right. So the Bengals game, it's a tough place to play. The Broncos have now turned this into a playoff game. It's going to be wild there. The Bengals are going to be fired up because I don't see them losing to the Browns on Sunday. Hopefully they do, but I don't see it. And the Broncos are going to have to come ready to play, man, like for a whole game this time. They looked like the best team in the NFL for one half last night. If they can put that together and play that way for an entire game, they can do some damage in the playoffs. But as of right now, Sean, they're not even in the playoffs. And I'm starting to get concerned that we're going to back into the playoffs by beating the Chiefs' backups, and that's just not how we want to go into the playoffs. I feel like that would – I don't know how I would describe that, Sean. Maybe you can describe it better than me. But losing this game to the Bengals and then beating Carson Wentz and the second-string Kansas City Chiefs to get into the playoffs, what's the description? How would that feel? Just like –
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, this week, you're playing a team that's win or go home. This game means everything to them. If this season matters at all to Cincinnati, this game means everything. And so if you don't bring your A game, you're going to be in the exact situation that you're alluding to. And I think in any sport, from a confidence perspective, if you're just in because somebody else screwed up and you're just there because you didn't get there on your own, I mean, it's going to be a tall enough task to beat Buffalo as it is, but you're beating Carson Wentz and you're only in because Indy lost some random game and Burrow lost to the Browns on a because it's a divisional game and it actually was close. I don't know, man. I don't love it, but at the same time, I love what's happening this year. I'm super happy about everything that we've been able to watch so far. You can cut it any way you want. I don't think we can beat Buffalo, man. I just don't. And I think this is one of those things where, if you remember back when, Peyton Manning was a regular season quarterback and he'll never win the big one. And he's, I remember all those things that people said about Peyton and Indy because Tom Brady was winning all the Super Bowls and, the Indy was like, do we rest them or do we play them because we're already the 1 or 2 seed, whatever, we got to buy. That feels like Josh Allen this year. It feels like he's, it's all Pat. It's been Pat. He wins all these Super Bowls. Josh is just never going to do it. Is he really as good as people think he is? Blah, blah, blah. And I think we're going to run into a buzzsaw in the first round. And I think we're going to get stomped. And I don't mean to say that I'm a Broncos fan. I bleed orange and blue. I love his team. I love what we finally found in Bo. But yeah, man, yesterday just really, you went from playing Russell Wilson and the Steelers and being able to just tear this dude down a peg after how horrible everything went last year. And now you just put yourself up against Josh. And so to answer your question, I don't think there's a lot of confidence in backing into the playoffs. Maybe they're young enough that it's different and they just don't care. But I also, like I said, I just don't think that it matters. I think it's Buffalo's year. If I had to make my Super Bowl picks, whether they win it or not, I think it's a different story. But I do think that they are going to represent the AFC.
Well, Sean, not only did the Broncos ruin the opportunity to play the Steelers, but just like we talked about last week, they ruined the opportunity to go to Houston last night too, because Baltimore's playing Pittsburgh next week, I think. So like you had an opportunity to leapfrog Baltimore, even though they have the tiebreaker. You'd have a better win. You'd have a better win-loss record than them, but now that's out the window. unless the Ravens go 0-3, which that's not going to happen in my opinion. So yeah, you're looking at a game against Buffalo. There's just this stigma, not only about Josh, but about the Buffalo Bills, right? And I have to see it. I get that they're good. He's the MVP, blah, blah, blah. Do it in the playoffs, okay?
Sure.
And if you get a first-round home game against a rookie quarterback and probably one of the youngest teams in the NFL and you don't win again, man, that narrative is going to start getting louder about Josh Allen. And
Yeah,
I
but
just don't.
it's like the NFL thing, man. It's like if it can't be my team, the whole Bills Lions perspective and just like the saddest fan bases of all time that just have so much heartache. Like I'd be down to watch that just to see somebody get it. You know what I mean? And maybe that's just my Chiefs hatred and just hoping that somebody can knock them off their pedestal and get in ahead of them. But maybe it's because I was born in upstate New York, and I watched the Bills lose, from my parents' bedroom as a small kid in upstate New York. So I was there for 4 straight losses. So I get it all, man. You know, I, I'm a shadow Bills fan. I always root for them when the Broncos are out, just because that's where I'm from. But yeah, I don't know. Yes, you're right, dude. You got to do it in the playoffs. I get it. But it just seems like, I don't know. It's not just him this year. You get rid of Diggs. You're like, well, they're not going to be able to pass. And then they've got young receivers and they bring in Amari Cooper late and they seem to be able to throw all the time. Dude's getting 6 touchdowns a game. I know we're on a tangent here, but I think it's tough I think it's a tough ask for a young Broncos team.
Sure. They did go in there and beat Buffalo last year, though, with a worse quarterback. So there's that.
It's true. Yeah,
they did,
that's true.
and pretty much the same defense. So
yeah,
I'm not ready to yield that one. But the thing is, they have to get in, because I'm telling you what, if they don't beat the Bengals and the Chiefs out of some pettiness play all their starters to keep the Broncos out of the playoffs, the Broncos could lose that game too. They really could. So we don't know what the Chiefs are going to do. They may not want it.
If the Chiefs lose this week, they may, Buffalo could be close enough that they have to play. And to your point, yeah, I mean, don't take either of these games for granted because you're not in yet.
No, and the Chiefs may not. Andy Reid may not want to sit his starters for 2 weeks before they play again. You know what I mean? So there's that. And we did go off on a tangent there, but it's fun to talk about the possibility of the playoffs and to talk about some other teams sometimes. And I personally just don't give a rat's backside like who wins the Super Bowl if it's not the Broncos. But speaking of Buffalo, they're gonna have to go to Kansas City again.
Yep.
And that is a house of horrors for those dudes. So, and just playing Kansas City in general is just, I don't know, man. I do think they're the better.
Do you think Kansas City beats Baltimore in the second round? If they're the 5 seed, you do?
Yeah, they own Baltimore, dude.
I don't know, man. I just can't get. I know, I just don't see it from the Chiefs this year, and maybe it's a hater again or whatever it is. But I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel like they barely beat the Panthers. I know they're like, oh, good teams win 1-score games and they find a way to win. It's the freaking Panthers, dude. Like, there's just bad teams playing with them, and maybe it's playing with your food. I don't know, man. Maybe it's distractions. I don't know. Pat's. I know how you feel about his constant ankle injuries and his, on TV sympathy, but it's like, I don't know. I just feel like they're trying too hard for this three-peat thing. I think it's in their head. I don't think that they're the best team in the AFC. I don't think they're the second best team in the AFC. I still think regardless of seed, Baltimore is still that team. I don't know.
They may not even be the third best team in the AFC.
Yeah. So yeah, but they earned home field advantage. So if you want to take it from them, you're going to have to go into their house and take it. So.
Yeah, I think the Broncos match up better with the Chiefs than any of these other teams, and they're not going to get a chance at them if they can't beat Buffalo.
Yep.
So I don't know. We'll have plenty of time to break down that game, Sean, in the future. Hopefully, if the Broncos can take care of business this week against the Bengals. Keep in mind, Broncos fans, the NFL has moved that game to Saturday at 2:30. It is no longer on Sunday. They moved it up. So to make a huge inconvenience for me and church and all kinds of stuff. So thank you for that, NFL. But Sean, looking forward to it, man. Talking to you about the Bengals game. Hopefully the Broncos come out with a W. We'll have our predictions later this week for you guys. I'm just telling you right now, I'm not picking the Broncos to win this game, and I'm not picking them to be close in this game. I think the Bengals are going to blow them out. Unfortunately. So we'll see. I hope I'm wrong. Anytime I say that the Broncos are going to lose, I always hope I'm wrong, but it's going to be a very, very interesting game, Sean.
I'll wait for the injury report, see how I feel, see
Mr.
how the
Riley
Bengals play this week.
Moss.
Well, yeah, I mean that, and I also want to see how the Bengals play this week. We'll see how they come up against the Browns. That can make a huge difference. If they lose to the Browns, it's irrelevant. So it's not a big deal. So I'm more optimistic than you are, but I'm definitely nervous given their offense. So we'll see how it plays out. We're obviously big Broncos fans, so we'll be rooting for them whether we feel like they're going to win or not.
100%. We're always rooting for the Broncos. That's why I don't care who wins the Super Bowl. I just root against the Chiefs, and that's pretty much what I'm going to
Chargers
do.
This year.
Oh, they're not. And I know last week I said the Bengals are not a factor and all this stuff, but that's because I thought the Broncos would just eliminate them by their own doing. When you have to go somewhere and win a game on the road against Joe Burrow, it's going to be tough. So looking forward to talking to you guys about that game next week. Stay tuned for our predictions and stay tuned for Mr. Steven to be back next week. Thank you for listening. And as always, go Broncos.